Back in the early 90s, one man wasn't just a player in the Indian stock market, he was practically a god. His name was Harshad Mehta, and his unbelievable rags-to-riches story had the entire nation hooked. Now, to really get this story, you gotta picture Mumbai in the 1980s. The economy was just starting to crack open, and there was this electric feeling in the air. Like for the first time, anyone with enough guts could get rich and get rich fast. And right in the middle of all this chaos and opportunity was this young guy from a pretty humble background. He looked at Dalal Street, that's India's Wall Street, and he didn't just see a place to get a job. Nope, he saw a kingdom he was going to conquer. And pretty soon, they'd have a name for him. They called him the Big Bull, because it seemed like he had this magical, almost supernatural ability to make any stock he touched just soar. But here's the secret nobody knew. His Midas touch, it wasn't magic. It was fueled by a massive, completely illegal pipeline of cash that he was secretly siphoning from the very heart of India's banking system. And when the truth finally came to light, it wasn't just his own flashy empire that came crashing down. It was the life savings of millions and millions of ordinary people who had bet everything on him. So the big question is, how? How did one man manage to pull off a scam this huge? Well, to figure that out, we really need to go all the way back to the beginning. Harshad Mehta definitely wasn't born with a silver spoon. He grew up in a crowded Mumbai chawl, which is a world away from the high-rises of Dalal Street. But he had this absolutely burning ambition. He wasn't just going to join that world, he was going to own it. So he gets his foot in the door as something called a jobber on the trading floor of the Bombay Stock Exchange. And it was there, in all the shouting and the chaos, that he learned the rules of the market. And, more importantly, he learned how to break them. And let me tell you, it didn't take long for him to go from being a small-time player to the absolute king of the market. His rise wasn't just fast, it was meteoric. I mean, think about it. In less than 10 years, he went from a complete nobody to the most powerful man on Dalal Street. He had this incredible knack for picking winning stocks, and his confidence was so infectious that people just followed him blindly. By the early 90s, if Harshad Mehta bought a stock, everyone bought that stock. He wasn't just playing the market, he was the market. And that's exactly how he got his legendary nickname, the Big Bull. He became a symbol of a new, ambitious India. He made everyday people believe that the stock market was this foolproof, one-way ticket to getting rich. And boy, did he live the part. We're talking a 15,000 square foot penthouse overlooking the sea, a whole fleet of luxury cars. His lifestyle was front page news. He wasn't just a stockbroker anymore. He was a full-blown celebrity. But the question remains, how did he actually do it? How could one guy have that much control? Well, the answer is kind of wild. It was hidden in this simple, totally overlooked loophole in the banking system. The key to his entire empire was this seemingly boring piece of paper called a bank receipt, or BR for short. It's basically an IOU that banks used when they traded government bonds. But where everyone else saw a slip of paper, Harshad Mehta saw a golden ticket. So here's how the Mehta method worked in a nutshell. First, he'd create fake bank receipts out of thin air. Then, he'd use these forged BRs to get massive short-term loans from banks, illegally pulling all this money out of the banking system. And finally, he'd take all that cash and inject it straight into the stock market, pumping up his favorite stocks to insane levels. It was a brilliant cycle and completely fraudulent. But you know what they say, an empire built on lies can only stand for so long. And as Mehta's star rose higher and higher, so did the suspicion. One journalist in particular started asking some really tough questions. And that journalist was Suchita Dalal. She was sharp, she was tough, and she was not easily impressed. While the rest of the country was cheering for Mehta, she was chasing a small tip about a huge chunk of money that had gone missing from a bank. And she had a strong feeling the Big Bull was involved. So she started digging, and the more she dug, the more it became crystal clear that this incredible stock market boom was just a house of cards. She was on the verge of exposing the single biggest financial scandal in the history of India. And when her story finally hit the newsstands, the fallout was immediate. And honestly, it was catastrophic. The second Dalal's expose was published, that entire house of cards just collapsed. The market didn't just dip, it plummeted. All those stocks that Mehta had artificially inflated came crashing back down to earth, wiping out the life savings of countless small investors in the blink of an eye. The crash was just devastating. Millions of regular people who had put their faith and their money into Mehta's tips lost absolutely everything. The whole scandal shook India's financial system to its core. And just like that, the big bull's reign was over. So here we are, decades later, and the story of Harshad Mehta is still totally fascinating. But why? What is it about this particular story that still has such a grip on us? Well, it's because this story has everything, doesn't it? You've got the relatable underdog who becomes this larger-than-life anti-hero. You've got the thrill of a high-stakes gamble. And you've got this fascinating moral gray area of a man who broke every rule in the book to chase the ultimate dream. So what is Harshad Mehta's legacy, really? Was he a brilliant financial mind who was just punished for outsmarting a flawed system? Or was he a common crook who got what he deserved? That's a question that, even today, India is still trying to answer.